Our other top story tonight, an investigation into an alleged culture of cover-up at The Ohio State University that resulted in the abuse of hundreds of students over 2 decades.
There is no dispute that those hundreds of young men, students at The Ohio State University, were sexually assaulted by a university doctor. OSU itself commissioned a 300-page study that documents it. What is in dispute is whether it's too late, as the university claims, for the victims to do anything about it. Dr. Strauss committed suicide in 2005, and the university says the statute of limitations bars legal claims. But the victims will be silent no more. And tonight, for the first time, you will hear details of what finally led to the suspension of Dr. Strauss in 1995. A warning, some of what you will hear is graphic, as we begin a deep dive into the report with help from the man known as Student B.
They never said that this monster didn't do it. They never said that. They just said it's just been too long. That's it. Yeah. That's their defense. Tell your kids that. Like, let them tell your kids that.
Stephen Snyder-Hill is Student B. His trauma central to the so-called Perkins Report. In 1995, he was the student who complained so relentlessly that Dr. Richard Strauss was finally suspended by Ohio State, ending 2 decades of sexual assaults disguised as physical exams.
He molested me the same way that he did others, and a lot of intimidation.
January 5th, 1995, Snyder-Hill went to the OSU Men's Health Clinic because he had a strange lump on his chest.
He asked me if I was gay. He asked me if I had trouble sleeping with one person, asked me if I wanted something else sexually. He was like getting really gross, and I just knew it was inappropriate.
And then
he did a full, anal exam and a rectal exam. And then I knew that it was really bad when he put me down to check my chest. Then he sat there and rubbed it, and he had an erection, and he pushed it against me and just held me there.
A terrifying story, repeated to the Perkins investigators over and over again, mostly by former student athletes with scholarships on the line who were sent to the team doctor and then assaulted.
You go to the doctor and you think, I'm here for, I'm vulnerable. Strauss made me get completely naked for this exam. I knew something was wrong with that, but you just can't put yourself in that place.
Snyder-Hill wasn't a vulnerable student athlete. He was a 25-year-old veteran of military action. Still, he was hesitant to challenge a university doctor.
The greater good got to me, and I was like, I have to do something. So I called him the very next day.
A meeting was set up with the medical director, Dr. Ted Grace, a counselor, and shockingly, Dr. Strauss.
And as the meeting went on and I started getting into the details, once I got to the part where I talked about the erection, he just slammed his hand down and it was like a demon came out of him, screaming at me and just saying, you're going to ruin my reputation.
He says for the rest of the meeting, Strauss screamed at him.
Tell me right there, like, what? I mean, we would never do that to a sexual assault survivor today. You never put them in front of their abuser and then let their abuser berate them.
He says the next day, Dr. Grace called to ask what Snyder-Hill wanted to keep quiet.
I want you to promise me that it's never happened before to another kid. I want you to promise me if it ever happens again that I get a call, because I will not let this happen to anybody else. And I said, and I want you to document it in his file. And I said, if you can promise me those 3 things, then I'll just go away.
And he wanted it in writing.
I could tell that bothered him a lot. But sure enough, 2 days later, I think I got a letter, and the letter, he kind of skirted around the issue. He didn't say he would call me. He said, we'll consider future complaints with prior complaints. But in that letter, he said, we've never had another complaint about Strauss, only positive comments.
But what a lie that was. And you will be shocked when you learn the first time someone raised a red flag about Dr. Strauss, how many people knew, and the depth of the cover-up. We'll have that story tomorrow evening at 6, and we asked the university to comment for this story. Because of pending litigation, though, no one can appear on camera. But in public statements, President Dr. Michael Drake has acknowledged OSU made what he called reprehensible and inexcusable mistakes back then. The university is offering counseling to the victims and has committed to making some kind of financial settlement. More on that tomorrow night at 11.
Also tonight, you may have seen the now viral video of a student in Central Ohio trashing an Israeli flag. Hundreds of student athletes and student patients sexually abused by an Ohio State University doctor in a culture of cover-up. Thanks for joining us at 6. I'm Mark Taylor.
I'm Colleen Marshall. The abuse went on for decades, shrouded in silence, with victims apparently too intimidated or too ashamed to report it. Tonight, only on NBC4, shocking new revelations about the number of people who were in a position to stop it but didn't. And the first red flag was raised less than a year after OSU hired Dr. Richard Strauss.
Thought I was the only one because that's what they told me.
Stephen Snyder-Hill was told that lie in 1995. So it's hard to believe that back in 1979, a student trainer first questioned why the new university doctor insisted on doing an aggressive groin exam on a wrestler who was being treated for cauliflower ear. This report details a field of red flags about Dr. Richard Strauss, who committed suicide in 2005. More than 300 men have now come forward, claiming they were groped, molested, even raped by Dr. Strauss.
I questioned whether they were silent. I think some of them told who they thought that they could tell, their coaches, their teachers, or the director of student health.
Indeed, it is a shocking list of people who apparently heard about Strauss and did nothing. At least 5 team physicians, 6 assistant athletic directors, 1 athletic training director, 4 athletic trainers, 18 student trainers, 4 student health officials, 22 coaches, and 2 athletic directors, all identified in the so-called Perkins-Coie report as people with knowledge. And the report concludes, from Strauss's earliest involvement as a team physician at OSU, it was broadly known within the athletics department that Strauss showered alongside the male students, a practice the student athletes repeatedly complained about to their coaches. By 1994, so many young men on the fencing team complained to Coach Charlotte Reminick about Dr. Strauss molesting them that she went to the medical director, who in turn wrote to the senior associate athletic director. The fencing coach complained specifically that Strauss was performing improper or unnecessary genital exams on her male student athletes, in addition to watching the student athletes while they showered. Still, no one stopped him, and more than a year later, Stephen Snyder-Hill was molested, and then told he was the only known victim. How does that make you feel? I mean, this doctor who was trying to get you to agree to shut up and go away was basically lying to you.
That part is infuriating, but you have to think psychologically. When you put this stuff away 24 years ago, I thought I did everything that I could to protect people and to do the right thing.
Snyder-Hill, identified as Student B, was assaulted by Dr. Strauss on January 5th, 1995. But the explosive report reveals Student A complained about Strauss 2 days earlier, Student C 1 day later. The university would not comment for this story because of the lawsuits filed by hundreds of men. But Dr. Michael Drake has made carefully worded public statements, acknowledging university officials made mistakes back then.
We at The Ohio State University are deeply sorry for Strauss's abuse decades ago.
Their apology in it, I think, at least 4 or 5 times referenced the university from years ago. Really adamant to make sure that that language was in that apology to us. Strauss's family apologized to us. His wife, who he divorced in the 70s, and his son apologized and said they felt so regretted that we've gone through this. Not once did his wife say, hey, I divorced him, but that's not what Drake did. So it's like, you just think that, I just wish that Ohio State University and the president of the university had the integrity of Strauss's ex-wife.
But it is difficult to argue that the current OSU administration inherited this nightmare. The university itself launched the investigation, paid the $6 million price tag for the Perkins report, and is offering counseling for free to the victims. No one in university leadership now was at Ohio State during the 2 decades Dr. Strauss was abusing students. Because of the statute of limitations, the university likely has no legal obligation to respond at all. But OSU has said it is committed to a financial settlement. How that will happen and how the fallout from the culture of cover-up is also now coloring the career of Congressman Jim Jordan will be the focus of our report tonight at 11.
Certainly some explosive information we learned there in that report.
And each day more information is trickling in. Today there was a post on my Facebook page from a swimmer who says he was raped by Dr. Strauss, and he is one of the people involved in this lawsuit. So information will continue to come out, and it's incredible how long it went on.
And we're going to learn more tonight on NBC4 at 11.
Yeah.
All right, Colleen, thank you.
There is one person involved in the 2 decades of sexual abuse of students at The Ohio State University by Dr. Richard Strauss, who is guaranteed to never pay a price for what happened to hundreds of young men. And that is Dr. Richard Strauss.
Strauss committed suicide back in 2005, years after he was allowed to retire with dignity, getting a full pension and the lofty title of Professor Emeritus. Emeritus, that is, sorry.
What he did to at least 300 young men is just now percolating to the surface, revealing devastating scars for his victims and an unsuspecting university administration forced into damage control for a crisis it unknowingly inherited. We have new information tonight on what might happen next and who could be forced to share the blame.
On day 1, at the start of the season, the sexual assaults began.
It took but a week being on campus before my first experience happened with Dr. Strauss.
Neither the members of the board of directors nor university president Dr. Michael Drake were in power when hundreds of students were abused by Dr. Richard Strauss. They are not responsible for what went wrong, but they are the only ones who can make it right.
I want to reiterate that we are dedicated to a fair outcome. To be clear, this means that Ohio State is committed to a monetary resolution.
Mediation is underway for a financial settlement, and the university is offering free counseling, although the statute of limitations means the university is not legally obligated to do anything. But this is an image crisis.
This university knew. It knew prior to my enrollment, and it knew after.
Because the victims are talking.
People have asked why we didn't say anything back then when these abuses were going on. The fact is, we did. We openly complained about the abuses and the actions of Dr. Strauss and the deviant culture within Larkin's Hall.
The Perkins report says at least 22 coaches were aware of what Strauss was doing. At least 4 former wrestlers and 1 referee are on record saying they complained to then assistant coach and now Congressman Jim Jordan. The high-profile congressman insists he knew nothing.
We're happy to talk with the folks who are doing the investigation, but nothing. Things they said about me just were flat out not true.
That was Jordan 18 months ago. He would not be interviewed for this story. His office says he had never heard of any abuse or he would have dealt with it, claiming multiple investigations confirm that. But Jordan's office could not produce any of those investigations for us.
So when you hear Jim Jordan and other university officials say, I didn't know that was going on, do you believe them?
So I think that an appropriate response from anybody in this situation should be to take a little bit of ownership and say, you know what, I was there, and by God, if I could have done something, I mean, my heart goes out to these people.
Stephen Snyder-Hill is identified in the Perkins report as Student B, the Strauss assault victim who relentlessly complained in 1995, leading to Strauss's suspension. In a show of arrogance, Strauss then complained about his boss, medical director Ted Grace, to the medical board. We found this July 1996 response from medical board investigator Marcia Barnett, who revealed she learned Strauss was under investigation by the university for inappropriate examinations of male students, that the university was considering making a formal complaint to the medical board, and that the university asked her to maintain confidentiality about the investigation of Strauss. We now know the university never filed a formal complaint, instead allowing Strauss to retire with a pension and emeritus status. His hundreds of victims were silent for decades until a single complaint opened the floodgates, and the now adult men are demanding justice.
So I'm here to speak for those who still suffer in silence. I'm here to stand with the men who have put themselves out there in the public eye since the beginning and led the way, supporting those of us who are reluctant to step out from the safety of anonymity.
We're David, they're Goliath. We know that we're small and they're big and they can't fail, and we've heard all that stuff. I don't care, because I got a slingshot.
It seems certain that there will be a financial settlement of all the pending federal claims filed by more than 300 men. But with so many victims and so many lawyers, the final figure is difficult to predict. The university has said also that there are safeguards in place to make sure that what happened with Dr. Strauss can never happen again. And you can see my full interview with student B, Stephen Snyder-Hill, on our website. Just click on the link to any of the 3 stories we have on our homepage tonight at NBC4i.com.
In other news tonight, the lead defendant in a network of Ohio men charged for crimes related to the sex abuse of 2 10-year-old children was sentenced to prison today. 35-year-old William